You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
This is Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. Mark Thompson is a huge loser. His show, very bad, weak, soft. But if you're interested in crap and you're a communist, you can go to edge-show.com. I don't recommend it.
Mark Thompson here with J Elvis Weinstein.
Hi.
And J Elvis Weinstein, you have so much going on in your life. I mention it when I can.
Thank you.
Honestly, this episode has been much awaited because this is a guy who lived his whole life and continues to live his life as a homeless person.
Wow.
By choice. I mean, that's a big choice to make.
It is a big choice, yeah. But I guess it's the best way to be homeless.
Right. You'd rather it be a choice than you end up there.
Right.
Yeah. And he's this erudite guy. It's weird.
Is it, well, I guess I'll find out from the interview, but I assume it's he has some authority issues.
Maybe that's it. Come to think of it, I didn't ask him.
I really wish I could have come that day.
Yeah, J Elvis couldn't be there. That's why we're putting him on the intro. But I did talk to him about drugs.
Yeah.
You know, like, did that enter at any point? And then he did admit to one vice. I'll let him tell you what it is, but
Okay.
It wasn't drugs. And he's been all over the world as a homeless person. So on some level, he doesn't like authority. He likes living off the grid. Yet, you'll hear him speak about all these different things that suggest a sort of, for example, acquaintance with the latest technologies. He's a filmmaker, wanted to be a filmmaker, and has made movies. He's got a film on YouTube.
Wow.
And he's got a DVD of the film that he sells. So he's an interesting guy. His name is Bumdog Torres. And if you look him up, he's Googleable.
Yeah.
And he's someone who's been homeless everywhere. We asked him about San Francisco, being homeless in San Francisco, homeless in LA, homeless in these different places. Like, what are the different homeless experiences? And he actually breaks it out almost by decade. Like, he said, San Francisco in the 90s is a good time to be homeless.
Right. The golden age.
Right. Now, not so good.
It would be horrible. Right now, that's tough going.
It's grim. It's grim.
I was in San Francisco last time, and a guy started giving me like a genuine sales pitch, a panhandling sales pitch, and another guy came up and tried to make a move on me while he was doing his pitch, and he got furious, I'm with a client,
Can't you see I've got a live one? So did you give him something at the end of the pitch?
No, because they started fighting. I just had to sort of walk away.
I see.
I didn't want to get involved and go. Honestly, my homeless dollar really I think is better spent with guy A.
I may look for a different place to spend my homeless dollar.
Yes.
Before we get started, I want to mention also that people can support this podcast by going to our website, edge-show.com. There are places there. If you're going to buy something through Amazon anyway, go through our website at edge-show.com. Click on anywhere it says Amazon in an episode, and that'll take you through to Amazon. Same Amazon as usual. We get a little piece of whatever you spend.
A kickback.
Yeah. And we appreciate all those who have supported us in other ways. There are people who use the PayPal link and they'll leave us a little something. But I know we've been on a little bit of a mini hiatus, but we're going to now be cranking. So that's the plan, to be on every week regularly. I want to also mention that J Elvis has a podcast. It's called Thought Spiral.
Yes, with Andy
Kindler. And J Elvis also has an album, a comedy album.
Called Chunks.
And we're going to talk about chunks in a future episode because we want A, to help that album because it's funny, and B, to help you because you're our pal.
Thank you.
Let's get started.
This is The Edge.
The advantage it means.
They let guy just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use for.
Oh, got it.
Let's do some political talk. He's forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He is our own Michael Shure. Come on, Michael Shure.
Thank you. Man, it's good to be back here. It's really good to be back.
You're a fan favorite, but you're very hard to nail down. So it's nice to have you back on with us. J Elvis Weinstein joins for this conversation.
I'm less elusive.
J Elvis is a bit more dependable. Michael's all over the place because
Well,
he's covering.
Some of us were in Tanzania. Some of us were with animals.
That is true.
I was here.
All right. Well, we're all back, sort of. Michael by phone. Hey, Michael, let's cut right to the top story, which is impeachment. And now this drumbeat of impeachment being louder than ever? Even Nancy Pelosi, who's been a vocal opponent of impeachment.
No, I think first of all, I think you have to qualify it for what it is. She hasn't been a vocal opponent of it. She was a vocal wait till it's timer of it. She is in the past, I don't know, maybe 20 years, 15 years, one of the best politicians we have ever seen. So there are a lot of people who defer to that political acumen, but it's reached a point now where 160 Democrats and her flock in the caucus in the House are saying, we need to investigate and we need to do this. We need to start this inquiry. And she has finally said it. And that means that she's consulted with a lot of her members that are in purple districts, are in red districts that a member of Congress won. Anthony Delgado yesterday of New York comes from a 50-plus point Trump district in New York. When he actually came out for impeachment yesterday, in a strange way, that kind of paved a junior member, a new member, freshman Democrat coming out for it. That kind of paved the way for the speaker to come out today and say, you know what, we got to do this. And so I think she comes to it from a different place. There was a lot of impatience on the side of the Democrats. Nancy Pelosi has to measure things in a different way, and I think a lot of people defer to that.
Yeah, Michael's always been sort of reminding us that Nancy Pelosi's holding together a coalition,
right,
even as people are dumping on her.
And I think, and she even said, I was watching her speak at the Atlantic Magazine Forum before I came over here, and she was talking about this latest thing as a crime America can understand.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's a really important thing, right? I mean, when they had the tapes, the Nixon thing got Republicans over. This today is the first time there's an actual quid pro quo, right? Investigate the former vice president's son, and if you don't, we're not going to give you military aid, right? These sorts of things they're so plain. It's from a Law and Order episode, right?
Right.
That makes it a whole lot easier. What J Elvis said just now is so true. I mean, there's something that's transactional here. With all the Mueller, there was never that kind of exchange. And that's the same thing as 1973 with Nixon. Once Republicans saw that there was something, they started coming over. It was a different time, yes, but it's still an important ingredient now.
It feels as though the charge to gain public support is going to be very media-centric. So the story that you're describing, and I like the way that you just described it, like just even in a nutshell, sort of the quid pro quo, that has to be communicated in a real strong way and easy to understand way. I felt the Mueller report dissection didn't do that. Everybody pointed to this is how obstruction of justice works, and this is the way he obstructed it here and there. And it seemed like it was almost maybe a little too mired in detail. Many people, as I talked to them, even when I was traveling, they're really not acquainted with a lot of detail. They get a visceral feeling. And so on some level, I feel it's incumbent upon Democrats and others who feel that, there is really a problem with Donald Trump and the way he does business. They need to communicate that in a way that is viscerally understandable.
That's true. I mean, listen, if more news is gotten from people by a tweet than by the news hour with Judy Woodruff, right? If you watch the news hour, you're going to understand it in a much better, a much more thorough way. But in terms of communicating it like you just described it, Mark, that's where it's really important to be able to have this nugget that can be talked about as quickly as we're talking about it here. It's so important to this quote-unquote cause. The other side of the coin is that you have a lot of the problem with seniority in the House is you have older white men, for the most part, communicating these things. Now, that's not really fair to the Democrats. Oversight has Eliza Cummings, who's not that. Intelligence has Adam Schiff, who's a little younger. Gerald Nadler's older. There have to be voices that are a lot more dynamic talking about this, and I think the Democrats understand that a little more now than they have even in the past months.
Well, I am glad you mentioned Nadler and Schiff, because Schiff is, I think, very good, and he was really terrific during the Mueller hearings, but he does seem to be circumspect often in the way he speaks. And I think that the Democrats have got to get a little more Trumpian almost in the way they communicate.
Today helps that, Mark, because when you are a committee chair, you're there because the speaker helped you get that position, right? To a degree. I mean, obviously your seniority, obviously your committee helps, but the speaker is really instrumental in that. And you are part of leadership, which means you are a deputy of the Speaker of the House. So it's tough waters for them when they have a speaker who said she's not ready for impeachment, and you have Gerald Nadler trying to use every sort of semantic device to say, right, I am, I am ready for impeachment, even though we can't actually say that's what we're doing here. Now, today, this frees those men up, and I would imagine you'll see a different tenor from them over the next days.
Will you help me with something? I got into an argument today on the air with one of the other hosts who feels as though this impeachment is a bad road to go down because you can't win it and there's going to be an election anyway. And I'm of the opinion that you have to impeach. I mean, they're just, at some point, what are you going to allow the executive branch to do?
You're waiting around for a murdering president?
Right.
Is that?
Well, that's true. Here's the thing with that. You're right. It's much better to have an empowered electorate for Democrats a year before an election than than to have people who are frustrated with their leaders for tiptoeing, right? So if you're going to energize your Democratic base, the thought is you have to energize them with what they want, which is to talk about this and to push for this. It's not the number one issue, but getting rid of Donald Trump certainly is. And that's why Joe Biden's perceived electability is so much more important to so many Democrats than Elizabeth Warren, who they prefer in terms of policy because she is specific and generally in their ballpark. But they really do. So many of these voters that I've spoken to and that you've heard from, those are voters who are really intent on number one issue, beating Trump. Impeachment is an avenue toward that. The other part of it is that you could get, Mitt Romney the other day whispering to the media that, there are Republicans that may support this if what we find out of this Ukraine phone call and this whistleblower is true. It doesn't mean you're not going to get any Republican support in the Senate. So you have to go down the path that seems like the right path, and I think you get rewarded for doing that in some way. I don't think, the easiest comparison is Bill Clinton and during the whole Lewinsky affair. That's different. That's different because there were a lot of people who didn't think that was the right path then, that it didn't rise to impeachment. If this is a serious international meddling in our election, a quid pro quo from the President of the United States to a foreign leader, I think it will have a different kind of impact on senators. Again, that's optimistic. These are Republicans. They're from red states who love this president. There is the political angle to it, but Democrats, should think that they're going to be rewarded for doing what seems right.
Well, and I think the talking point that started to take root in the past couple of weeks is just the simple thing of why do we have this clause in the Constitution if this isn't it, And,
right.
and I've heard more and more people saying some version of that, and it's hard to poke a hole in, because like I said, what are we waiting for? The murdering president?
Well, I was just going to say that's just what you said, and it's true. Do we wait for this man to stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone like he threatened that he could get away with? That's the thing. So if you look at this presidency and the way this guy has operated, if he's not impeachable, or if he certainly does, if his behavior doesn't warrant at the very least an inquiry from the House, there's also some currency to being on the trail and saying, look, we impeached him. It's those damn Republicans who stood in the way of removing him,
Absolutely.
of convicting him in the Senate. So if you do the right thing, generally you're going to get rewarded for it. But if you have to do it in the right way, and to have also a next spring, right? Let's imagine that into the winter, there's a hearing in the Senate ahead of the Iowa caucuses, ahead of the New Hampshire primary and Super Tuesday. That's not a place the Republicans want to be. And, politically, if you just look at the politics of it, it probably plays well in this election year. When that whole thing happened, it wasn't right before 2097, 98. It was a different time. This is just before an election year, and that should matter.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's one of the points I've made to it, and it's sort of one of these pushbacks that you find against the argument that Donald Trump wants to be impeached. There are a bunch of these op-ed pieces now. He is baiting the Democrats for impeachment because he wants to dominate the news cycle. Donald Trump is going to dominate the news cycle anyway. Now he's going to be in a news cycle with specifics about these various illegalities that are being pursued in Congress.
Right. It's exactly right. And that's sort of where you want your opponents, right? He is a master of social media. He is going to have good days during this process if that's what it comes to. But the point is that what you just said, this is where you want to put this guy. You want to put him back on his heels, and you want people to doubt his strength as a president, and you want them to see that there's something untoward about what he's doing. So
I also think his mastery of Twitter is slipping. I think that these 70 tweet days, with paragraph long tweets after paragraph long tweets, are muddling his message. Honestly, I think he's he tweets so much outrageous crap and retweets so much outrageous crap that only a few things poke through these days, where he's trying to make a bunch of points. I think he's slipping on that.
That's true. It's hard to see if they've reached the level of fatigue of this tweet thing. That's hard to quantify.
Well, I think it's safe to say is people aren't readers.
But if you look back at the Clinton impeachment, right, you're going to see that there wasn't social media, and social media does change it in an impossible to predict way.
Right.
So we don't know if that's going to help this president or hurt him should he go through what President Clinton went through. What President Clinton had was the sympathy of a lot of people who didn't see that this should have worked, and his popularity during and after impeachment was higher than it had been at any time in his presidency. So I don't know that we're not capable of saying, oh, this is going to be terrible for the president. If he's able to master the social media side of this, maybe that rules today. We don't know. We're not going to know until we do it, but that shouldn't stop people from doing it if it seems right.
I predict, just tactically, he won't be able to withstand the daily, because there will become a point where big bad news will be coming out on a daily basis, and he is pathologically unable to refute any attack against him. So he's going to be juggling.
That's true.
Hard.
Pathologically unable to resist fighting anything.
Answering.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
But he has also always defied any prediction that people who make these predictions
Absolutely.
have made. So just when you think, then look what happens, right? So everything is stacked in terms of reasonableness toward what you say being right. But who knows? If you get a noisy enough. He has the power of the presidency. He can go from state to state as he does and have huge rallies that change the perception, that make him seem sympathetic, that get coverage of people wearing red hats and excited about seeing him.
Yeah, he'll get that, and it'll be a smaller and smaller number. I just believe the one thing that he has been consistent about is his narcissistic pathology. The one thing that you can see consistently is the way that he responds to attacks.
No question.
I've been certainly looking forward just to the debates. When he has to be on stage with someone like Elizabeth Warren, say, firing facts at him, in a way that Hillary couldn't, because he wasn't a menace yet.
Right. Well, that's true. That's the big part of it. She threw the facts. She won the debates on paper, and then you're right. He wasn't the menace that he is now. He was this novelty still, but he's still a novelty to the people who came out for him. And novelty candidates don't usually have staying power, so that's an important part of the whole.
Yeah. No. I predicted he'd have a Morton Downey like curve originally, so I was wrong.
Right.
Well,
No, I think we.
I was going to make the point, and I'm glad we're on this, that his popularity, and you alluded to Bill Clinton's popularity, but his popularity is not that high, is it, Michael? I was going to make this point earlier, but then you kind of checked me ahead of time by making a very good point, I feel, which is sort of like the ricochet of social media is impossible to predict, so it almost doesn't matter what his approval rating is now. But back to my question, it's not that high right now, right? You're not dealing with a very popular president.
No, and that's why you see Mitt Romney feeling safe going out there and saying that there are other people like him who would do this, that he's not alone, but that it facilitates his low numbers. Typically, forgetting Donald Trump, if we're talking about, Lyndon Johnson. If you have low poll numbers, people are going to run from your low poll numbers, and that's and so they eat their own. And if his poll numbers still stay down, they're going to eat him too.
And the only loyalty that Donald Trump engenders is that of fear, and once that fear element goes away, the loyalty does too.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So I want to check in with you next week as we follow this bouncing impeachment ball. And maybe we can get into some other things, too, like presidential politics. And I know the election is way off, but there are shifts in polls. And talk to us about how significant that is. But for now, I'm going to let you go. But I really appreciate you spending time. I know it's hard. And, oftentimes we have to.
I love it. You always say that. I love doing this. It's my favorite thing. So
all right. Well, we love you back. Michael
Shure,
everybody. What? Wait a minute. Folks, please, let the man speak. What is it?
No. He's done. I was just wondering if you're going to be in America next week.
Well, that's always, I'm week to week on that. Yes, you're well aware.
Okay. All right. Good.
All right.
All right. Thank you all. Okay.
Yeah.
Goodbye, guys.
Yeah.
If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
I begin my conversation with Bumdog Torres, someone who has spent his entire life on the street, homeless. But we started with just a sound check, and he was saying that he had heard another episode of our show, and it kind of got into a discussion of music and that kind of thing. So we leave all that in, and Bumdog Torres.
You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
But anyway, you were saying, go ahead. You'd heard the Chuck Negron episode.
Yeah.
And I was saying that I just wanted to try to communicate to everybody who is not old enough to remember Chuck Negron how completely ubiquitous that music was. Three Dog Night's music was everywhere. And I was saying that now, once in a while, a song will punch through with a Bruno Mars or Pharrell's Happy or whatever. You'll hear it everywhere. But apart from that, people have such specific choices that you don't have that kind of inundation of one pop song, let's say.
I think the main reason you're thinking like is because you're listening to radio. And radio is almost passé right now. Mm-hmm. It has been since MP3s, and people could download whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted.
You mean music radio?
Yeah. Well, I'm saying like...
broadcast radio.
Broadcast radio.
Yeah.
Now people can download anything they want at any time. And when you look at people's musical library, either on their iPhone or wherever they have it, you see something that's much more eclectic than you would ever think of. You know, people who had Black Sabbath, they also have Miles Davis. You know, these stoners are listening to, classical music.
Yeah.
When you look at their actual library, you're kind of shocked at what a range they have. And also, I think another thing about it is, and this is something that I believe it was the drummer for Metallica pointed out, I think in the 90s, is he said in Los Angeles, take two completely different radio stations that used to be at war with each other. K-Rock at one end of the spectrum, which used to play new wave.
Stuff,
yeah. When they were in their prime, they called it new wave or semi-punk or whatever. And then you had KLOS, which was heavy metal, hard rock, or KMET. Now, these two hated each other. The idea that you would ever hear the same music on both radio stations, the same band, would be almost completely obscene. But that started to change, and Lars Ulrich, or
oh, yeah, sure.
I forgot how to pronounce that.
I don't know
how
to pronounce it. So.
He said because Metallica was being played on K-Rock and Nirvana was being played on KLOS. And he said, why is that? And he said, well, one of the reasons for it is, well, Nirvana really punched it through, combining heavy metal with the new wave or alternative aesthetic. But also, music has gotten so dull, so bad. I mean, that's no other way, no polite way of saying it, that people have begun to raid other people's stash. You know what I mean? There's not enough really good alternative music, so you kind of move over to the rap, say, or hip-hop. Or in the heavy metalers also, no longer mind listening to, classic doo-wop or whatever it is, because they're really starved. And I think this also reflects in the record statistics that say classical music.
Yeah, classic
rock is now one of the higher selling, that from the 70s and 60s are actually much higher selling than most of the current music that's being played today. Now, there are ones like Beyonce and Jay-Z who obviously are above the rest, but overall, that is the highest selling genre.
Just because we're talking about music, I'll just round this out. I'm always struck by this conversation pertaining to music because I feel as though there's this romanticizing of music from the past that isn't always fair to the music of the present. So when you say the music of today just sucks, or you didn't say it like that, but you know what I mean? You suggested it's not necessarily as good. I was thinking, well, he really has a point there in that it's more produced now. You go in and they get hooks sent to them from all over the country or the world. Then they'll try to take those hooks and they'll build music around that. And at the end of it, you think, wow, that's not really a song. That's like a factory. Yeah, exactly.
Of, a bunch of other
stuff, yeah. But to be fair, there's also real music going on, too. And so I'm always wary of that. I don't mean to get off on this, but I don't know that the music of yesterday was better than today. But I will say this, if you can just grab, which kind of, as you say, I love the notion that you just grab a hook here, grab a hook there, remix it, and you've got a hit. It's like, really? Feels like less of a creation, but that might be judgmental in its own way.
That, I agree with you on that side. That is judgmental in a way because, well, I mean, not against you or that particular opinion, because I often think like that myself. But it's like art, like, say, painting. And people say, by the 1970s, that people openly said painting is dead. Or they said art is dead, but they said painting is dead. And I didn't really think of it like that. When you look at the history of painting, truly there's nothing else you can do. When a guy crucifies himself to a Volkswagen or has himself shot like the artist, the artist I'm talking about, the performance artist, he had himself crucified to a Volkswagen.
Wow. I really don't. I missed that.
He put himself in a locker for 2 days and called it art.
Okay.
So anyway, that's performance art, all right? So There is no more art and originality were considered simultaneous. So if it wasn't original, then it wasn't real art. And when there was no more originality, when, Jackson Pollock did his thing, and then, Andy Warhol, and then there was just nothing more you could do with canvas, But I think it kind of missed an important component is that, yes, everything's been done, but it's like all the alphabets have been done. You can take those elements like words or like letters and create your own individual thing. And that's what hip hop did. That is what rap did. By 1982 or 85, everything that you could possibly do with music had basically been done. And rap music was an acknowledgement of that. It had already been done. I think even Billy Joel said in the song, after 85, everything was gone. There was nothing else,
But you can't really believe that. I mean, I think one of
No, but hold on.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, but let's say that is true, all right? And that was the feeling, that everything had been, there's nothing more original that you could do with singing, at least.
All right.
So these rap artists said, all right, if you can't sing it, let's just strip it of the singing and just communicate. You can't really sing a song differently, but you can communicate something different, You can take that as an alphabet, and that's when they started taking the music and just grabbing it and then putting it alongside their words because they realized you couldn't play new music. There was nothing new. So they would take the old and then remix it and do it again. And that's something that actually Bob Dylan would do. And Bob Dylan, when he began to hear rap music, he began to notice it. These guys are real poets. They don't care, and they know it, And he realized that they were doing actually the same thing that he had been doing for years, although it's a different tradition.
That's fascinating. Look, I think one of the beauties of art, and similarly one of the beauties of music, is that you never really do it all. You never really play it all. In other words, that canvas that you have and that canvas that I have, maybe I'm a bad example, but I mean, to an artist, you can always come up with something original, something new, something that might have been influenced by different styles or different things and experiences. But the truth is that there's such originality in art. And I would say the same in music. The problem with music is that those influences can be, and maybe this is true in art as well, but can be so pronounced that it becomes almost plagiarism occasionally because there's a tune, there's a phrasing, there's a musical phrasing I'm talking about that might be so resembling something that was an influence on the artist that it's, kind of close to not original anymore. But it was just funny to hear you say, by 1985 it had all been done, because I feel like, maybe that's, not literally the case, and you're just kind of making a broader point, as with Billy Joel, But I always think that music is one of these universes, and as is art, of endless possibility creatively.
Well, rap music was an acknowledgement of that. And in fact, take Picasso, for example. You say he was one of the more original artists. But he said, at his time, it had everything else had already been done. You couldn't like paint a picture better than someone could take a photography to do photography. So he said, all right, let's do something different, and that's
That's a great example because he was a classic artist. I don't know how many people are aware of the fact, but he was literally like a realist painter.
And his most famous saying is, bad artists copy, great artists steal.
That's great. I know one Picasso story. He used to go to the same restaurant all the time, and the waiter at that restaurant saved all of the signatures that he had on bills and other stuff. He saved them all and then ultimately resold them. So anyway, it's so cool to have you here.
No, thank you.
So the name Bumdog Torres, tell me how that name happened. Is Bumdog
I'm actually going to legally change my name to it one of these days.
Was it a nickname?
Of course it's a nickname. Nobody names himself Bumdog.
No, I know that, but I'm saying was it something that you called yourself?
No. It was, I took it. When I was a teenager, I would look around and you'd see, back when I was a kid, there were real bums out on the street. Today, it's homeless because they just don't have enough money to pay rent. But back then, these were men who had just decided to, sleep on the sidewalk and just not get up, And I used to get on the bus and on the way to school, and I used to just envy them. You just lie on the sidewalk and just not, just watch the world go by. And that's, something I admired, and I thought I was just nuts. And then I started reading up, like, on Buddhism and Taoism, and, I realized that there was a precedent for what I was, my aspirations for a non-entity. And also I realized that you can travel with either a lot of money or no money. And I never had any real hopes of having a lot of money, so I simply learned how to become homeless. I learned how to live on the streets. I never had any drug problems or alcohol problems. In fact, I don't even do them at all. So I just learned how to do it. And I traveled San Francisco. I went across the United States. I was in Florida, and then I traveled to England, and then France, and then Spain and Morocco. Then I went back to Spain, and I get kicked out of Spain because I didn't have any money, which was pretty humiliating, getting kicked out of the poorest country in Europe for being too poor.
What was the moment that they said that they kicked you out?
Oh, they found me in the mountains. You know what I mean? And I was over my visa. And if I had money, they would have said, all right, just get on train and come back. But I was living in the mountains. They caught me up there, on a mattress up there. So they realized I didn't have any money, so they kicked me out.
When they catch you up there, is that because somebody complained about you? What are they doing in the mountains looking for you?
I'm pretty sure because people could see me. There was I'm pretty sure someone complained because there was like a complex that I suppose I'd like to think they couldn't see me, but I'm pretty sure they saw me.
Uh-huh.
So someone finally complained.
You grew up where?
In the Crenshaw district.
So that's in Los Angeles, and I'm really curious how you kind of set out on this life plan early on. I mean, there are a lot of things interesting about your life, I think, or your situation, and I would imagine your life. But I'm wondering how you set out on this so early as a goal.
Well, I dropped out of school after the 7th grade.
Why?
I busted my hip, and then I had to stay out for a little while, and then I just refused to go back. It just seemed pointless to me, and I was getting big enough so that my mother couldn't force me. That's an issue in the black community with women raising men, because eventually they get too big. You can't really intimidate them anymore unless you're really big yourself. Really. But
was your mom a positive influence?
Yes, and like all parents, you have your issues with them. But when I look back at it, it was I don't know, karmic or synchronistic. But my entire education came from her bookshelves because she was a big believer in adult education during the 70s. And so she had all these books on philosophy and physics and, sociology and art as well. And that's how I educated myself, literally from her bookshelf and television.
Wow. So you had this yearning for learning on some level, but you just kind of, in a way, were learning off the grid the same way you live off the grid.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
it got to a point where I was learning more by myself than I knew anyone else around me knew. You know, it's what you have all these worlds open to you, or you're conscious of a bunch of things that you can't even begin to communicate to your friends, you know.
When you dropped out of school then in 7th grade, did you live at home or then you had to leave home?
No, I was still at home.
So she just was like...
She wanted to, you know, when I look back at it, I don't really understand it myself. I was quite insistent on not going back to school, and she tried to enroll me in a homeschooling thing, which was actually pretty good. It was one of those Christian homeschooling things, which, again, it was fairly educational, but it was Christian. So, you know, their explanation for dinosaur bones was that dinosaur bones are bigger, so that's why they're lower in the earth, and that's why they find them deeper in the earth than, say, you know.
Yeah, you can skip that day.
You know, I mean, I actually believed that when I read it. But then, ironically, my mother also had books on anthropology. And then I began learning about evolution and that it is a science, and that's what it is. I also learned about metaphysics through a book she had, Autobiography of a Yogi. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's one of the greater books on metaphysics.
So she wasn't a Christian herself, or was she?
She was all over the place, actually. You know, she was. I mean, every Easter we'd go to a Catholic church to do whatever. I don't even remember, since it was only once a year. And then she'd be meditating in a Buddhist temple, and then we'd go someplace where I'd see pictures of people floating over, levitating over fences. I never understood quite what that was, but she was very, very open. She had a very open architecture as far as religion went.
She sounds really cool to me.
She was actually very, very strict. She was very remarkably conservative. She was Puerto Rican from New York. She was heavily involved in the 60s with all the different movements. When I was a kid, one of the earliest memories I have is going to an Free Angela Davis protest. You know, so she was in that stream of thought.
And yet she was strict, you're saying?
Yes, she was strict. I mean, she very controlled, you know, type of woman, very conservative despite very left-wing politics, very conservative on a personal level.
Yeah, that's why I asked. Mm-hmm. And your dad was just not part of the scene?
No, my father was a professor that she met in Boston College, and that's actually where I was born. And then 2 months later, I was in Los Angeles. That's all I could take of Boston.
And did you reconnect with him at any point or try to?
No. There does come a point in your childhood, like from birth to 2 years old, you're connected with your mother. You don't realize that your mother and you are two separate people. And then around 2, that disconnection becomes obvious. That's where the terrible twos come from. You know, you start screaming and yelling, and it's a very traumatic point. So from that age to 7, you still want to be around your mother. But from 7 to around 14, you need a father figure. You know, that's when you yearn, that's when people start, if they don't have a father or a father figure in their homes, they'll often attach themselves. Like I attached myself to my uncles or a boyfriend that my mother would have. So around that time, you do need a father figure. And that's when I was conscious of not having a father. But after that, it didn't bother me anymore.
So you started this kind of sojourn. You became a traveler. You lived in this way. You say, though, you continued in the house as a teenager.
Yeah.
And then you began this plan, which was a life strategy just to live on the streets, or at least what was the plan? It wasn't to live on the streets. I don't think that was your plan.
No, actually it was.
Okay.
I didn't want to work. At some point I realized, you know, I think that's a teenage thing that you don't want to work, but I didn't want to give up my teenage...
Your freedom.
Yeah, exactly. I had no intention of giving it up. And although I'm pretty smart, I don't really have a lot of discipline to put things in practice. And I don't know if you've ever seen Decline of Western Civilization, Part 2.
No.
You ever seen it? No. Well, Part 1 was about punk rockers, and that was the first one, very good. Now, the second one was about the hair metal groups that were in Hollywood in the mid-'80s. And when she asked them, he said, well, if you weren't a rocker, what would you do? And almost all of them said, I'd be a bum on Skid Row. You know what I mean? It's either this or absolutely nothing, So to me, that was my attitude as well growing up. I could do something creative. I could write. But if that doesn't work out, I'm just going to end up a bum on the street. So you know what? I'm going to do that first instead of the other way around.
Yeah. If the bum on the street thing doesn't work out, I'm going to become a famous artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I don't have to fall down. There's nowhere but up to go from here.
In all these places that you went and in all these places that you lived, because you didn't just visit like a tourist. I guess
I
you
lived there.
Yeah. So what were some of those experiences like?
Like where?
Like, you mentioned Spain, or I guess, I think of London, or I think of these cities where there are other people who are also sort of living off the grid in a bohemian lifestyle kind of way. And I would imagine that you were exposed to a lot of them.
Yeah, the interesting thing about London is, you grow up, I never read Dickens, but I've, watched so many shows that basically Oliver Twist and all the things. And people say here in America, they say those are characters that he created. But when I went to London, those people really did exist. I'd be in these squats where everyone was homeless, but there were guys who had a lot of money and their family cheated them out of it. They were almost like nobility, and then they were an orphan. Everyone was talking about the orphanages that they had been in when they were kids, because they almost grew up together in the streets, just like Oliver Twist or the Dodger. And those were real people, and they still exist. That's what astounded me and gave me such respect for Charles Dickens, is that he wasn't creating characters. He was literally describing people that existed right then and there.
Did you get ideas as to how you wanted to live, or did you just, maybe not deliberately like jotting them down kind of way, but just by being around these scenes? Or was this like...
No, I've always been just me. I don't...
You're not looking for a strategy from any...
no. Or even if I was aware of one, I knew I couldn't put it into practice. It's just not the way my mind works.
It's just an interesting thing. Then you end up, I asked you this when I first met you, you end up on the West Coast. You said, I've been homeless in San Francisco and I've been homeless in L.A. And I asked you, which place is better? And you told me San Francisco. And I was struck by that because I was fully expecting...
that was San Francisco back in the early 90s, not today. But there is an atmosphere. There's certain... When you travel around enough, you notice certain similarities between places. Like San Francisco is very, very similar to London in many ways. But the thing about San Francisco is that it was just so easy to live in. It wasn't rough at all. And I mean that in the best and the worst of senses. There were a lot of, gay people were there because it wasn't a rough environment. It wasn't because they were very tolerant of homosexuality in San Francisco. It's just that they were just kind of weak to it. They weren't going to do anything, as opposed to, say, if you were living like that in Texas. Now, I have a lot of respect for you if you live like that in Texas. If you live like that in San Francisco, not so much, because it's much easier. It's just no one's going to mess with you. But it was just incredibly easy. I got there and I thought I was going to, live out on the streets and struggle. But, I had, that's the first time I got onto a GR welfare, and they were giving, which I'd never heard of before. And they were giving you like $340 a month, and then they were giving you another $200 in food stamps. And, and then I had a place to stay. And, I was just shocked at how easy it was to live in that place.
And what happened to that? Why did you
just
stay
got tired
there?
of it.
I see.
Just started to travel again.
And so that was the 90s. Did you stay domestic, or did you travel internationally again?
Well, that was the first place I went in the 90s, right? And then the second place I went was Las Vegas, where I only planned on staying a few days, lost all my money within a few hours, and stayed a few months.
I'm betting that story is repeated by others, not just you.
Yeah. It was that people ask me if I have any addictions, and they say, well, if you don't drink or smoke, you must have no addictions. I don't tell them I do have one. It's gambling. Yeah. I absolutely 100% love gambling, the way other people love pot or beer. even to this day, when I see pictures of Las Vegas and slot machines, I get chills. You know, I have I have to stay away from that state. You know.
Is that what you did? You played slot machines in Las Vegas?
Mostly slot machines. But
That's
I do have
wild.
just a gambling. I love the adrenaline rush of it.
Sure.
You
It's
know?
a real thing.
And that's why I don't judge other people if they use other types of drugs. You know what I mean? Because, if that's how, you get off, that's your thing. Mine is gambling. So I'm not
Right.
going to.
How did you get the money to gamble and to live and to travel?
Well, certain places I did work, although my mother was always, it's a shame that I have to say this, but my mother always would send me money, at intervals, not sometimes consistently, sometimes not. But, she would send me enough that I didn't use a lot, so I could get by on it, I'd like to say, I was totally independent, I roughed it, but no, that's not true.
But you never had a bank account? You always had the cash on you? Or how did you handle money through the many years you were,
different ways, Sometimes she would send me a Western Union or, but also I did work. I did hustle the streets, you could always find a hustle to do. And that was the main thing.
Give me an example of a hustle.
Well, in London, I lived in what was known as the Maryland Squats. Marilyn Monroe had lived there when she was making a movie there. And what we would do is we would take out the fireplaces because they were antique fireplaces, and we would sell them. We would sell them for like $100 each. That's one. In Paris, I used to sell fake hash, which was kind of scandalous, but to tourists.
I bought some of your fake hash as a student in England. It wasn't maybe yours, but it was one of your people.
One of my peers,
Yeah.
yes. I always felt bad about that, but I didn't really like doing things like that, but it came to a point where you were starving and it was either you or someone else. And that's one thing that I benefited growing up. We were actually very poor, but not crushingly poor. It didn't shape me as a person that, for other people, they had to go out and steal and they had to go out and do God knows what to survive. I never grew up like that, but I understood the element of not having enough money to eat or being so desperate that you had to do something desperate. But I never crossed that line simply because my mother was, she took care of me to a certain point that I could, it didn't shape me.
What did your mother do for a living?
She was a legal secretary.
Uh-huh. So you made money with the hustles. Occasionally your mom would send you money. I was asking about the bank account because I was just curious. You live so much off the grid. I mean, your life is in some way so disconnected. So
Yeah, but that's not. That's just.
Like you wouldn't have an ATM card type thing.
Well, every
Or
once
would
in a
you?
while I did.
Yeah,
it wasn't something I was fundamentally against.
Right?
It's just if I didn't have enough money to put in the bank, what's the point?
Got it. So when you kind of answered this question, but I just wanted to, and then I want to talk about homelessness and just generally what's happening now out there in L.A. Where you are. But before I do, I'm just trying to square certain things, so you'll forgive me. So it was through the hustles, it was through the little work in quotes or whatever you're doing that you were able to pull together sufficient funds, for example, to travel. Because like when you mentioned Spain and Europe, I mean, you had to get there.
Well, when you get to Europe, it's pretty easy to get from place to place on trains.
Right.
It's not like flying around.
So really all you need to do is get from the States to Europe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that I had a job in Key West doing maintenance and landscaping.
You're so likable and so erudite and so interesting. This is a weird thing, and I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, it's astounding to me that through interactions with people, that there wouldn't be a mutual investment. I'm just talking about in terms of personal dynamics, in wanting you around, wanting to, hey, we're looking for someone like you to help out with blankety blank. You know what I mean? Because you have that, I'm going to call it a charm almost. And did you push back on those moments? I'm sure they happened.
No, but it doesn't happen regularly. Like I just met you at that photography place, and
It was like an art exhibition. Yeah.
And what happened? I don't usually go to those things, but I used to go to them a lot when I was downtown. And a friend of mine, I had gotten a camera, and I was trying to get my friend to explain it to me. And he was always going to art exhibits. I mean, he's like an art gallery hopper. You know, he goes from one to the other and the other. And he says, "Come on to this one." So he invited me because I was in that neighborhood. And I was outside with my shopping cart, and there was like this red carpet and the velvet rope, and I'm like, I'm never going to get in here, man.
I mean, literally, you had your shopping cart that you live out of with all of your stuff, and you park it out there, and 8 feet from that is this red carpet and that you're talking about, and a velvet rope with a doorman.
Yeah, I wasn't joking about that. Yeah,
exactly. That's my point. I wanted everybody to get the fact that it was real, that moment. And how did you get in?
Well, my friend did show up, and he was on the guest list because he had gone to these things so often. So, I mean, but I was out there for like a half hour with the security guard staring me down, you know, and when my friend showed up, I walked right in behind him.
That's great. That's great.
And then...
so those moments I was getting to, you're saying they happen occasionally, but not as much as I might think.
No, I mean, you don't meet a Mark Thompson every day, right?
Right. Well... No, but I'm talking about through your life. People that, you know, you're a fresh-faced young man. We could use someone like you in our organization. You never had.
No, I don't meet. I just don't literally. I'm not in that circle.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
I used to have, when I was in Santa Monica, I was a dumpster diver. And that's all I did, you know. And I used to imagine, man, I'll dive in somebody important's trash can, and I'll have an interesting conversation. But that never happened. Actually, it did happen, but every once in a while it would happen. But, you know, no
moment of lightning in a bottle type thing.
No Hollywood mogul or anything like that.
When you're dumpster diving, you're just looking for things of value that you can turn around and resell?
No, I don't do it anymore, but when I was doing it, because I got too many tickets from the cops, you know, it gets kind of a drag, the threat of going to jail because you're in a trash can getting trash. You know, the idea of it kind of got me down. But
by the way, when you get a ticket for that, do they expect you to show up in court? Or you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And if you don't,
then they put out a warrant for you.
And then the next time they stop you.
That's how I acquired my name. I had a warrant out for failure to appear, and I was in LA County for a couple of days. And this was after I'd come back from Spain in the 90s, late 90s. And so I was talking about my experiences, and they were saying, well, do you drink? And I said, no. Will you smoke dope? And I said, no. I said, well, why you be bumming everywhere? And I said, because I'm a bum. And they started laughing. They said, oh, so you're a bum dog. What's up, bum dog? Hey, bum dog, come over here, play cards. Hey, bum dog, come over here and, play some dominoes. And they were, making fun of me, but I liked it, so I just kept it.
That's wild. So when you're in that dumpster diving, you're looking
Well, I haven't done that for years.
Okay, but when you were doing it, you're looking for things to live on, or you're looking for things to turn
I was
around?
just looking for cans, bottles and cans.
Oh, I see, okay.
And to recycle. And it was, back then, it was, I had no problem. I had a good time doing it, because you were by yourself. I just put in my earphones and just would go dumpster diving.
Yeah. Tell me, are you a social person or not so much a social person?
I like to be alone a lot, but I am a very, very social person. Someone explained it. It's a personality type. You like to be alone, but you always want to be around people. One of those types of people. Yeah.
So when you move to L.A. anywhere, when you settle in L.A.,
When I get kicked out of another country and settle in L.A., that's more accurate.
Okay. That's what happened. You got kicked out of Spain and you end up in L.A.
Actually, recently I got kicked out of Thailand. I got kicked out of Thailand in 2014 back to L.A.
And was that was a visa violation?
That was another visa violation.
And where do they find you to make themselves aware of that?
Well, I was an illegal alien, and unlike being an Hispanic in Los Angeles and being an illegal alien in Thailand, I kind of stuck out.
Yeah. Well, you're a tall man of color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's putting it mildly. Thank you.
Where did you hang out in Thailand before they busted you?
I had places. I had in terms of hustles, I had a job over the internet doing Photoshop and design for a friend of mine, and he would help me out every month, and I would do this stuff for him. I had little odd jobs doing translation. I had a job teaching kids English. They were like 5 to 10 years old, but I don't have any education. But they said just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I said, okay, all right, A, B, C, D.
I can do that.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah. When you were doing is that what you mean when you say doing translation, or do you speak another language?
No, I don't. Like if someone, I had a landlord, and I had this really cool. It was in a hotel, and it was air conditioned, Wi-Fi, cable, everything, and it only cost like $75 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to keep it.
How did you leave that?
I couldn't even afford that. That's how little money I had. That's how torturous it was, I used to think, man, even if I leave here, I'm going to keep paying this just to keep it.
That was it. Was it Bangkok or what part of Thailand?
That was in northeast Thailand, by the Lao border.
How did you know where to go?
Oh, I just drifted. I went wherever. I had to go to Laos. This is the thing. I was actually on my way to India because I had some job offers to teach film. When I was in Maui, people had been talking, a friend of mine had been talking about how in Asia, they'll let you teach English even if you barely speak English, just if you're a native speaker. So I thought, okay, well, I don't really feel comfortable teaching English, but I do know film. I can teach film. And so I sent out a bunch of resumes to all these countries. And a couple of them in India said, yeah, sure, come over. Now, this was 2008. Now, I didn't have the money to get over there. I was trying to scam it up while I was in Maui, and then 2009 hit, and that's when the economy completely tanked. That was the worst year of my life, And a lot of people say the same thing. And I'm shocked how many people say 2009 was the worst year of my life, And so that went down the drain. But a couple of years later, I had applied for my passport, and they didn't give it to me. And I thought maybe that was because of some, whatever. They didn't want to give it to me. They didn't want me to leave the country. I said, all right, And then a year had passed, and then a friend of mine said, well, why don't you ask them why they didn't give it to you? So I sent them a note. They said, oh, we had the wrong address. So they sent me my passport, and I just happened to have a bunch of money on me because I was hustling.
This is the U.S. passport.
This is a U.S. passport. And I had some money on me from doing nefarious activity. So let's just put it at that. And so I just bought a ticket, got on a plane, and went. Now, I was on my way to India, but I needed a visa from the Indian government. And I was on Maui, and the Indian embassy was on Oahu. But it was complicated. So I thought, you know what, instead of getting it in the United States, I'll go to Bangkok. I'll stay there for 30 days, and then I'll get the visa there and go to India. Now, when I got to Bangkok, a friend of mine who I knew from downtown L.A. was also there. And he was working in the movie industry in Thailand. And he had a red camera, which was unique at the time. It was still a
that was a
rarity.
breakthrough kind of video, really.
It's just when it first came out. Well, this was 2011, but it was still relatively new. So he had this niche job, and I said, why don't we make a film real quick while we're here, short film. He said, and we're out on, I don't know if you know Thailand, Soe. We're on Soe Cowboy, which is the
I don't know
the hostro, so to speak, and we're talking about prostitutes. And I said, yeah, I know plenty of prostitutes, high-end prostitutes too. Well, how would you know high-end prostitutes? You're a bum. And I said, well, I'll meet people and I'll tell them I'm a bum. I'm honest about who I am, and they'll be honest with me. And he said, I'm actually an escort. At this, whatever. I said, okay. And he said, let's make a film about that, a short film about that. I said, okay. So during this 30 days, we start planning for the short film. But during this 30 days, I'm not doing what I need to do to get my visa,
I see.
So on the last day is when we shoot. The last day I have to go get my visa. So instead of getting the visa, I decided to shoot this short with him. And we shot it. But then I was kind of stuck in Thailand because I couldn't get my not only my visa but my ticket. I had to go to Laos to renew my visa just for Thailand, And then from there, I just stayed in Northeast Laos, by the Northeast Laos border.
By Northeast Thai border.
Yeah.
Southern Laos. Right?
Southern Laos, excuse
Yeah.
me. You got that one right. So that was that.
That's wild. This is an interesting story made even more interesting by the fact that you sustained yourself through life in these different in these different inventive ways. Well, maybe it seems inventive ways. You mentioned the short film. I just want to kind of stop the music here for a second, and I will get to the homeless situation in L.A. and I want to. And just generally in America, and I promise I'll touch on that. I mean, I'm talking to the audience now. And like, you didn't say you wanted to touch on it at all. I mean, you haven't said anything to me. You just were,
rambling.
You're just here. It's great. I love it. I love it's a real conversation. That's what this show is. But you talk about filmmaking. And one of the things that I found on YouTube is your filmmaking school, these little episodes that kind of teach filmmaking. And you do it in a very funny, kind of tongue-in-cheek way, but you can tell there's a real guy there who knows something about this world of cinema. And you mentioned the short film. So you can see where I'm going, and that is, where did this interest in film come from? Where did the knowledge about film come from? Even though in the school, again, the online YouTube thing, you're always going, I don't know anything about this, I don't know, but clearly you do know something about it.
Well, how do you reconcile those two?
Where did this come from? Where did you learn about film?
Well, I mean, I was always, let me see. The first time I ever thought of film as film was the first time I saw E.T., the extraterrestrial. And you went into that film and you came out and everyone was just a little bit different than when they started, And I thought, wow, this is cool. And when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, Steven Spielberg was actually my idol. I would think, man, if I could make movies. But when I say that, it wasn't like, okay, I want to be a filmmaker, because another hour I wanted to be a basketball player, and then this time I wanted to be a rocket scientist, or, it was all over the place. So you can't say I wanted to be a filmmaker right then and there. That's not what it is. But there was I can remember the exact moment where I could say I became a director. And I was watching a news show, I think it was 2020, on Steven Spielberg. And he was in the kitchen. And then he says to the cameraman, all right, point the camera up. He says, all right, leave it there. And he puts his hand up with the butcher knife. And he said, this is the way Hitchcock used to frame pictures. And he went, his hand with the butcher knife would go up and down with the camera standing there. And he said, that's directing. And that moment, I realized what directing was. Before that, you see the credits and you see directing, you see photography, you see all these things. It means nothing to you. You have no idea what these people, it's like gaffer. A director is like a gaffer, you don't know what that means either, At that moment, I realized what directing was. After that moment, I framed images in my head. I thought visually. If I read an article, I would frame it, what I was thinking of in my head, within, and so I just thought like that afterwards. And that was just instinctual. So I have a natural instinct for composition, but then I began to look at films. And when I looked at films, I didn't watch a wide range of films. I watched the same film over and over and over and over again. I'm one of those guys, right? And the films that taught me everything I know about filming is West Side Story, Midnight Cowboy, and The Graduate. In fact, I had recorded all three of those on a videotape, and it just happened that I had, almost by accident. So I would watch one and the other, and they were doing the exact same things, even though they were fantastically different films. Their transitions, the compositions are extremely similar in the way they're edited. And so when I would watch these over and over again, I realized that they were doing the same thing, and then I would look for that in other films. So, I mean, everything I know I learned from those three films. So you can't really say I know nothing, and yet everything I know from that.
And yet you know enough that you did have this little run, with these multiple episodes of sort of filmmaker's guide, or,
right.
Like, here's how to make movies. How did that idea happen?
Well, again, when I was in Maui, I had the idea of teaching film because, well, actually, we have to go back a little bit now. In 2004, I was in downtown LA. I was sleeping in a parking lot on 2nd and Gary, which is now this huge, disgusting condominium mall thing, But it was a parking lot when I was there, right? And there were people, it was the Arts District. That's what they called it at the time. and it was still the arts district. And a friend of mine invited me to his place because he had taken some video of me as I was walking by, and he says, "Hey, Bumdog, let me show you something." And I saw him on iMovie. He put it into iMovie, and then he edited it right then. And that's when iMovie was incredibly simple. Now it's complicated, but back then it blew me away. It blew me away that you can create something that easily. And I thought to myself, just for something to do, what I should do is I'll make a little video of me waking up in the morning, of just cutting it, and I'll just for something to do. And then I thought, well, I'll make another video of me walking around downtown and seeing these images. And all I would really need is someone with a camera, and then, like iMovie, I'll edit it on a friend's computer. And then I thought, well, you know what? If I combine these two, me waking up in the morning and me walking around downtown, then it's like a short film, And then I just started adding things on. I'll add me going to the library. I'll add me selling books. I'll add me doing this, that, and the other. And by the time I had planned it out in my head, I had a 2-hour movie planned out in my head. And all I would need, every single scene, all I would need is someone to hold the camera, and then eventually I needed to edit it somewhere in a computer to edit, right? So I thought, well, this is easy. This is going to be simple, right? But I quickly found out that cameras were rare back then. Video cameras were very rare. It's not like now you have them on your phone. And the people who had them would loan you their firstborn child for the weekend before they lend you their camera. I found that out very quickly. And also it was difficult finding a computer. But in that community, in that art district community, which was an actual neighborhood at the time, and that happened like what you're saying, because I met people, and people got to know me, and they said, yeah, sure, and eventually I met someone that said, you can work out of my studio right here, and got a computer right here, and you can do your editing right here. I thought, oh, wow, great. And I thought if I had all the elements, it would take me about 11 days to finish the whole film. It took me 3 years, mainly because no one believed I was doing it. No one believed I was making a movie. Now you can say you're making a movie. Oh, yeah, sure. My friend, so is my cousin, and everybody's. But back then it was still a unique thing, and certainly not a man sleeping in a parking lot was making a movie. So no one really believed me. So no one would really help me. I would try to say, could you come over here? Yeah, right. No,
I see.
So that was one of the, not just not having a place to stay and not having enough money to do it. It was that element as well.
And you're literally just trying to get somebody, hey, will you just hold this camera for a second so I can get this shot? And literally people don't want to do that. They don't trust you.
It's not that they didn't trust me. It's just there's also the dynamic of making a film, which is one of the more unique experiences in human history. And it's only been in existence for maybe like 120 years. Making a movie is an animal all of itself. And I learned how horrifying it was, the ups and downs, what just happened. I'm thinking everything's together. And then someone drops out, you have to arrange it for this place. So you arrange it for this place. You arrange this person to be there and that person to be there. But now the person can't be there, so he has to be there the next day, but you can't get the location that day. And then, so I'm getting a few minutes of it every few months. You know what I mean?
So it took you 3 years, but you did finish it.
I did finish it.
The other thing, and then I'm going to get to the homeless thing. Mm-hmm. In your coursework or in the these video courses or little episodes that have filmmaking courses at their core, the clips of Orson Welles remind me, because they're the clips of Orson Welles that you have where he's sort of saying, and that's why I was reminded of what you're saying as our narrator. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just thought,
ignorance.
I'll do this, I'll do that. And he talks about that.
Yeah.
And that's, it was a weird parallel between Wells, who was considered, of course, through Citizen Kane anyway, using shadows and different depth of field and all these different things, lighting, to be a breakthrough, revolutionary filmmaker on some levels. And yet it coexists with this guy who's telling us as the audience, I don't really know what I was doing. I wasn't constrained by anything because I didn't know what was acceptable and what was not.
Exactly. And that is part of my talent, is that I really don't know. No one's really told. I'm not in the environment where people say you have to do it like this or that or the other.
So I want to ask you about the pure process of being homeless. We've kind of touched on it, and you can romanticize it. And to be perfectly honest with you, as you're talking about it, and maybe it's just a reflection on the fact that you're this genial guy, clearly smart, seemed to have articulated what was a strategy of some sort to see all these places and have some of these experiences. without being obligated to some life or job or other stuff. But in that romanticizing in our mind, that overlooks how hard it is to live on the street.
Well, I mean, everyone chooses their own life. You know, Michelangelo said, people think my art is wonderful. They wouldn't think it was so wonderful if they knew how much work went into it. It's just a lifestyle choice. You know, you have yours, and people might think, wow, that's wonderful, the what you do. It's like the greatest thing in the world. But, you know, you have your own challenges that you have accepted are going to be challenges. If you accept them, that, okay, this is what I'm going to have to deal with, then it's not really a problem. It's part, you know, you chose your life. Now, if it's thrust upon you, like homelessness for most people now is thrust upon them. It's not something that they choose. Like, again, when I was a kid, these guys just didn't want to do it. You know, they didn't want to play the game, and those were the people I admired most. I'm a throwback to that, you know, but you can't judge the vast majority of people who are homeless today are not along those ranks.
The vast number of people who are homeless today are the victims, you're saying, of an economy that will not accommodate them?
It's different things. It's the main thing when I first started in the 90s, I thought they were all just poor. They weren't poor. They were actually drug addicts. There were people who had simply decided it's better. They'd rather spend their money on drugs than, you know, rent, which is, you know.
What kind of drugs were they doing?
Back then it was crack. Now it is much, much worse because it's ice or meth, and which is a far more horrifying drug.
Because of its addictive quality or more addictive quality? Or
it's the nature of it. Like crack would only last like 15, 20 minutes. But, you know, people could be doing it all day for days on end because, you know, every 20 minutes they'd figure out a way to get a couple of bucks to buy some more, right? So that would last. But with ice, it lasts so long. A little bit will last you a long time. Back then, $20 would last you 15 minutes. So I would be around a bunch of guys, and they would, the dope man would come and they would get high, but I would just walk away for like a half hour. Then I'd come back and they were relatively back to normal. Now you get $20 worth of dope of ice, and it lasts 3 days. You're high for 3 days, you know? I know people who stayed up for months, literally. Now, I didn't believe them when they said this. In fact, they were teenagers who told me they had stayed up for 2 months. And I said, that's ridiculous. The human body cannot do that. I mean, that's just impossible, biologically impossible. And then I talked to other people and they said, no, that is. Your body is not supposed to do that. But on that drug, it does. And that's what makes it so horrifying. Much intensely the worst drug that I know of, worse than heroin or opiates or cocaine or any of it.
That's the drug where you hear that the mother forgot about the child completely. She left. And in other words, all these situations in which you have child neglect and the like, I see oftentimes meth is what I
mean, it also happens on crack as well, but on meth, it's just elevated. It's multiplied several times over.
Well, then let's get to, though, the fact that you're living alongside this. I mean, are you living alongside that? Or, I mean,
I don't anymore, and that's it's a great sadness to me because I can't talk to anybody anymore, you know? Again, before they would get high, but they would have to come down, and then, you know, we'd have a conversation, you know, we'd barbecue, you know, it'd be all right. But now they're like that all the time, you know? So there's no point. I don't have many friends that I could converse to on the streets.
And, you know, I do a radio show in San Francisco, and the topic comes up constantly of homelessness. As you know, they're trying to build these, what they call navigation centers, which are these places that are not just shelters, but they're places where there are beds and, you know, showers and stuff that you associate with a shelter, but also counselors and other people who can help sort of reposition lives, try to reintroduce and reintegrate people into some kind of life that they may want. Is that laughable to you, or is
it's not laughable? Well, the only reason I'm snickering at it is because the L.A. homelessness, the problem of homelessness in Los Angeles and San Francisco are very vastly different. I'm sure in L.A. they are a section of the population. They are a grouping of themselves. In San Francisco, when I went up there, that's back in the 90s, it wasn't so much. And the shelters up there were like headquarters for IBM. You know, it was they were very clean, they're very neat. You I was always amazed at how well put together they were. But that's because the problem is containable. The problem is controllable, and that's because of the size of San Francisco. It's a big, small town, and a concentrated effort could stop homelessness. A concentrated effort can stop crime. A concentrated effort can do just about anything in that town if there's a political will behind it.
I would say one thing quickly. You ought to go back up there, and then we'll have this conversation, because I think it's different now. The statistics are so damning. Their homeless population has risen 30% in 2 years. That's a huge number of people. And if you go onto the streets there, and I know you're well aware of this, there really is a problem with homelessness to the point that, you can't find streets where there are not homeless people. It's not quite like that, literally. I'll put it this way. There are far more streets with homeless people than there were, I'm sure, when you were there in the 90s.
Oh, no, I do agree with that. But again, one thing hasn't changed, and that's the size of it. And I do know that, a concentrated effort could stop it. But obviously there are forces against that. There's a tremendous amount of money that's being flushed through there that, the homes, I'm sure, the price of living there is.
The big thing is that nobody wants any kind of shelter, temporary or otherwise, in their neighborhood. What's happening in Los Angeles? You say they're very different. You're saying that it's a chunk of the population that you understand
and
is
it's
homeless.
It's almost uncontrollable. It's spread out so much. There are things that you could do if they really, really worked at it. They're trying to recall Garcetti on this very issue.
I think they're spending $6 billion on it in LA.
There's no way that's true. I think that's bullshit.
Okay.
And that's
so the number, whatever.
Either it's bullshit or someone, a whole bunch of contractors and they're spending it on, consultants.
It's not getting down to the people.
It's not. No, it's not.
What would be the solution? I know it's a complex problem, but what would be, this general strategy or one of the strategies?
Well, I was actually thinking about this, and actually this comes back to what we started our conversation on back in the gallery, about how I knew you were. The first time I saw you was on a video of TYT's election night. When Trump won and Cenk Uygur was melting down. And we were talking about Trump and Trump supporters. And as I was reading up on it, there was a very popular article written by Susan McWilliams of The Nation about Hunter Thomas, and how he had somewhat predicted this in his book, Hell's Angels, back in 66 or 67. And he said the unique thing about these guys was they had an ethic of total retaliation. And he believed, and several of the reasons why, is because they had been left behind in what even then was being called the technological revolution. They did not have the skills to compete in this new technological world, which when we think of it now is, like sticks and stones,
Sure.
But they
weren't even dealing with the kind of technological revolution that followed, right?
But see, they were they were just a few hundred guys. But he predicted that by the 1980s, there would be millions of these people who were displaced by technology. Now, he was about 30 years off, because in the 2000s, it would happen. But now that is actually happening. The technological revolution is it's not as dramatic as the Industrial Revolution, but it's having an effect, a much more subtle effect, in leaving people behind. In the sense that you're having people who have all this money because they have the skills to work in this either technology, the financial sector, the health, so-called health medical sector. So all these streams of money are going by. And it's in the trillions now. You can't say billions anymore. We've touched on trillions of dollars going by, streams of money, and all you have to do is get in that stream, and it just comes to you. When I was just in the 90s, seeing a Lamborghini, you'd see it maybe once or twice a year in a good neighborhood. Now you see 2 or 3 of them a day. So there's all this incredible money, and people are wondering, where is this money coming from? And I can't pay my rent. That's because they're in these streams that they have no access to. They not only do they not know how to, say, computer program, they don't know how to make a GoFundMe so they can pay their health insurance. And they're being dropped down, and they are very angry. They feel like they've been screwed. And that they have this ethic of total retaliation. which is something that which is reflected in Donald Trump's rise.
Sure, absolutely, 100% true.
Yeah.
That they feel forsaken by the party that was supposed to be the party of the people, the Democrats.
It's not just that's more specific, but there is these people. There's more and more homeless because they can't afford rent. Everything's going up, but who's paying for them? Like in downtown, that was the place where you could step up. If you didn't want to become homeless, you just didn't want to live in your car. You got one of those little hotels, $200 a month hotels in downtown until you got back on your feet and then you moved out. Now those $200 a month rooms got bought and now they're going for like $600,000 to buy as the same exact rooms, And so you're living in a cardboard box and you can literally see the place where you used to live, occupied by these people who are in these streams of cash, who have the skills to take advantage of the economy that now exists. You do not. And they're falling, there is no net. They're just falling, they're being thrown out of their homes.
So when you talk about it that way, I don't see how, short of some sort of revolutionary strategy, revolutionary economic strategy, I don't see how you solve the problem.
There you have it.
Wow. And I was talking to someone about the fact that in India, you have the tremendous wealth right alongside. It's really what you just described.
We're turning into that.
Right. And that was my point. And when I was talking to this person, I was saying that, you have the destitute and desperate living right outside the doors of the Ritz-Carlton in New Delhi. I mean, right outside. And you're stepping over people who life has well passed them by. And I feel as though that is the direction we're going in. And I don't mean to sound some clarion call, but I think it really is clear, the gulf between haves and have-nots. And then, to use your words, the stream that you just can't,
of cash.
You can't jump into it.
Mm. And if you can, you're wealthy. You have these kids who have these, I met a couple in their early 20s. They have a YouTube channel. And I don't know, they just sit there and eat donuts and play pranks on each other, but they have, a condo. He bought her a Mercedes for her birthday. So if you have those skills, it's, the world is at your feet. So there's not a lot of people, I could say the benefits of them are obvious, but only if you have those tools, only if you have the tools to do these things.
The biggest chunk of homeless people is that chunk related to what you're talking about, an economy that's turned its back on them, economic culture that's turned its back on them. Mm. That's the biggest chunk.
That's the biggest chunk of the growing. That's why it's growing so fast. Before, like I said, it was drugs. But at a certain point, it kind of leveled off. Okay, these guys are drug addicts. Some get off drugs, they get a job, and it was kind of low. But now this constant increase of them, every year, I've never seen anything like that,
You have a phone.
I have a phone.
You have other technology and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are actually quite common now among the homeless. In fact, you'll see homeless people with 2 or 3 of them because they throw them away, especially in Los Angeles. The new phones, they get new phones and they throw the old ones away. So everyone has 2 or 3 broken phones. The screen is busted but they fix them. They know how to fix them, and then it's almost like a currency. Phones are almost like a currency among the homeless now.
If I had to come live on the street for a week, what would be the thing that would shock me the most, and what would be the thing that would be the biggest adjustment for me?
That depends on who you are.
Yeah.
Just a week doesn't do it. A week is camping.
Okay.
That's not. It's not an experience. It's
But do you sleep outside every night?
Yeah, I don't like tents. I used to have a tent when I was in Maui, but I don't like tents. I like to wake up and see the sky.
In a sleeping bag, or how do you?
Just a bunch of blankets. You saw my shopping cart.
I saw your shopping cart. But I don't know, what's in there. I didn't inventory it. And then you have an area that you hang out in, like your neighborhood.
In the Fairfax district. I'd love downtown, but it's been destroyed. It's just not the same place that I loved. And that was my heart. That was literally my heart, and it breaks my heart to see what's happened to it. Santa Monica's too boring, and then nothing ever happens. You go. I wanted to go to Hollywood, but Hollywood is now. It was always a freaky place, Hollywood, but with the ice, it turns into the super freak Olympics. It's just beyond weird. It's beyond. It's like I don't know, Mad Max Thunderdome or something like that. You know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's bad. You know, I don't really fear people too much physically, but they're on ice. They're up for 2 or 3 days and they're just high, and they start fucking with you, just because they're high. Not even because they have a grudge against you or they're trying to rob you, just because they're fucked up, you know?
Where do you take in media? Through your phone?
Yeah, phone, and I also have a computer.
Oh, you have a computer.
Yeah.
So you can still make films and edit on your computer now, right?
Yeah, but that's making a film by yourself. You can't make a film. I made a film all by myself.
Yeah.
Now, having made a film all by myself, I can tell you it's impossible to make a film all by yourself. The only reason I was able to do it is because I didn't know it was impossible. Can
you see this film anywhere except having a copy? In other words, is it on YouTube or something?
No, I had pieces of it on YouTube, but they kept taking it down because there's a bunch of copyrighted issues. But other than that, you just have to, I sell it out of my backpack.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Sketches of Nothing by a Complete Nobody, a film by the homeless Ed Wood of the new millennium.
Yeah, I finished that back in 2008.
I can't wait to check it out. Well, listen, you've got to come back and see us again.
It was a pleasure.
I really, really enjoyed it. It's a growing part of the culture. You know, that said, you've been on this path for so long as a homeless person, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that you didn't just end up homeless. This is a decision you made, and you have a window, as I say, on those people who have just ended up that way. And it's heartbreaking. I didn't even touch on kids. You know, there are so many kids who get caught up in this. Do you see many of those? Or
occasionally,
like
not
families like that.
I do occasionally, but they tend to be more secretive. You know, they don't want to be in the crowd. They don't want to be in a homeless area. You know, they tend to squirrel themselves in different places. You know, but it's not. Obviously, they don't want their kids around a homeless community.
Does the homeless encampment or community, does that attract you, or would you prefer to kind of be out on your own?
No, it doesn't. In fact, that is those encampments that you're talking about, which I never saw before until I got back from Thailand. I mean, you can only have a tent up maybe if you were in Griffith Park or in the woods somewhere, really, really secured. Otherwise, they wouldn't allow it. Now there's tents everywhere, and it shocks me. And these homeless encampments are actually the result of ICE. There's a certain nature in ICE that makes you collect together and gather stuff. So when you go to these places, there's nothing but garbage everywhere, you know, because they're up all night picking things up and bringing them, or they're taking something apart and not putting it back together again. And that's the nature of that particular drug. So when you see like a big, huge homeless camp like that, or encampment in an alley or something like that, even like 2 or 3 of them together, it's not in any way pleasant scene. And then it just really messed up on the drug. It's just, it's sad. It's sad. I stay away from it completely.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You can Google Bumdog Torres, and there is more, and you can see some of his stuff. I mean, I literally watched his YouTube channel. He's got some of these things he was talking about, these various video projects.
Yeah.
He's got them up there on YouTube. It's pretty cool. If you want to reach Bumdog Torres, good luck. He's a homeless guy. You can't reach him.
Don't you get it, people?
If he wanted to be reached, he wouldn't be homeless. You can send me an email. edgewithmarkthompson@gmail.com. Thanks for all the love. Thanks, J Elvis.
My pleasure.
And
easy.
And until next time, bye-bye.
I want to thank you for supporting Mark Thompson here on the Edge Radio. Fantastic show with all the jokes and J Elvis, and all the commentary and the politics and the bullshit. I love it. Edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash? Edge-show.com.